Good evening, good afternoon, and all that good stuff to everyone. Welcome to a civics discussion. What we're going to talk about here is basic civics, maybe some advanced civics for some of you. Um, you get a very basic understanding on your duties as a citizen, your duties as a voter, etc. However you want to put that, right? Now, we have to understand that civics, right, is the study of rights and the participation or the level of participation thereof of the citizenry of said country or state or locality, etc. Right. So we're going to get into that this afternoon, real brief. At some point in time later in the discussion, I will be posting a link so people can come in on video to chat about the what's been presented or any other questions they may have about civics or civic duties, etc., etc. Let me start off first of all. My name is Roderick Threets. I'm one of the network professors inside the Conscious Conservative Media Network. You can go find it at consciousconservativenetwork.com. I'm one of the network professors that talks about civics and the Constitution, because that's my wheelhouse, right? I'm all about civic engagement because the building block of our government is local. It's local. The federal government does not really matter. It has no bearing on your life. The state government has a bit of bearing on your life, but not unlike the local, right? And I'll put that into context for you. Okay. During COVID-19, where were your liberties taken away from you first? The federal government didn't take them, did they? They didn't. The federal government did not tell you to stay home, did they? Your state governments did, didn't they? And some states that didn't even lock down, ultimately your locality is locked down, right? But yet we put so much weight on the federal government for everything, right? When it's your mayors, your city commissioners, your county commissioners, your city council, etc., that issues these edicts that affect you locally, and a lot of them are against the state constitution in a lot of cases, right? But that's another story for another day. That's advanced lesson, or if we happen to get into that here, um, that's just fine also. So, without further ado, let's go ahead. Let's get into um, the presentation. Um, maybe I should make that full screen. Maybe I should make that a bigger screen. What do you guys think? I'll make myself the little itty bitty guy in the corner, huh? That'll work out. That works out just fine. That's excellent. Okay, so let's get into our lovely civics lesson here. So what we're going to do, we're going to describe the ways government systems, the distribution of power in between the three different types. We have unitary, confederation, and federalism. A unitary system is unitary government is kind of the government system which a single power, which is known as the central government, controls the whole government. In fact, all powers and administrative divisions within the government is controlled by the central single entity. And this example of the unitary system, you have the big huge federal government, and then the states have very, very, very little authority, or province or canticles or et cetera, however your government system is set up. So when we talk about big government, when we talk about government overreach, the unitary system is probably the best model to describe what federal overreach is, what people talk about big government is. A confederation, as we know, if you're an American, you know that our 13 colonies was governed by a confederation, aka the Articles of Confederation, right? And a confederation is a voluntary association of independent states to secure some common purpose, agree to certain limitations on their freedom of action, establish some joint machinery of consultation or deliberation. The limitations on the freedom of action of the member states may be as trivial as an acknowledgement of their duty to consult with each other before taking some independent action, or as significant as the obligation to be bound by majority decisions of the member states. And as you see here with the confederation, your states have all the authority to govern autonomously with a small, very small centralized government, which basically is run rogue. If we talk about confederation, we have to look at like the EU, for example, as a current day confederation, or your South African Union, or your South American Union, things like that. Those are your confederations that are live and kicking right now. When we see how those conglomerates are working out for us, right? Federalism, my favorite one, obviously, because I'm biased, right? I mean, if you're an American citizen, you have the pleasure and privilege to live in a federalist country, right? Federalism is a mix or compound mode of government that combines a general government, which is be the federal government, with regional governments, which are provincial, state, cantonal, territorial, other subunit governments, in a single political system, dividing the powers between the two, the federal government and your regional government. And as you see here, federalism, right, as you've seen the other models, how the federal authority was really big or really small. Here in federalism, as we know, as we understand, as we talk about the United States Constitution, they're all equal in power. And some people have lost sight of that. They've lost sight of that. Okay. They think the federal government acts like a unitary state when it's not. It's equal in power to the states, right? Because the states gives it power and they share powers like forth. But we'll get into that part. We'll get into that part later. We want to get into the 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 easier parts of this, right? So yeah, a sample test question for everybody, and everybody that's in the comment section. I see y'all on YouTube. Miss Cheryl, Miss Marlene. There's a few of you that are still sitting in the comments. I appreciate y'all coming through, as always. So I'm gonna leave this question up here for you guys, and I will be paying attention to the answers as they come through. Right, in the United States, and in our government in the United States, power is divided between federal and regional authorities. What type of government is this? All right, short answer, short order. Federalism. Federalism is the type of government we have. We just discussed that. Yes, 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 yes. Federalists. Yes, that is correct. Next question. You live in a country that is ruled by a dictator that has control over all areas of the government. This is an example of which form of government? And don't mind me, I'm gonna have a little sippy sip of a drinky drink real quick as y'all figure out the answer to this question. The answer to said question is unitary. Unitary form of government. Yay. Not so happy. Next question. I gave away the answer. Haha. But anyway, your country has decided to join the European Union. And joining, they give up some control, but will maintain most of the control. What form of government? It's a confederation. Yay. So here's kind of a draw up, a markup, etc. on kind of how the government distributes its power, right? We're looking at the big star as the federal government, the power, right? And then you can see the way that we've kind of discussed that a little bit. I won't spend too much on that graphic, but I just want to give people just a quick overview on what we kind of just talked about there a second. So let's compare the contrast of various forms of government and dependent on civic participation or citizen participation, right? Because we're here for civics, right? To understand how these things work, right? And in America, this is where we get lost, where we don't, as a whole, do not understand how the United States Constitution works, right? A lot of you have heard me say before, and I will say it again just for this broadcast, that the United States Constitution is very unique because the United States Constitution tells the government what they can and cannot do, right? Most countries' constitutions tell the citizens what they can or cannot do, which gives government all the power, right? And this is where Americans get it twisted because they think the Constitution tells us what we need to do, right? When it tells the government what they're confined to. But the people seem to continue to cede their power to that entity that is not supposed to have that authority. And then what do? They just take it anyway, right? It's, oh, you're just going to give it to us? Great. We'll take it. We'll take it. Thank you. And this is why we are where we are right now with a whole lot of our social issues being dealt with the federal government, right? But anyway, let's roll on. So we're going to look at how governments determine citizen participation, right? As you can see by the graph, it may be a little confusing, but I'll explain it to you, right? In an autocracy, for example, right? In an autocracy, government has all the power, right? And the citizens have no power. Citizens are not that. It doesn't even matter, right, if they participate or not, because it has no bearing, right? We look like an oligarchy, right? Government has majority of the power, right? A select citizens, aka the elites, have power in that system, and the citizens still have no power, right? Or let me put it in better terms, right? You have the government, you have the bourgeoisie that have all the power, and the proletariat have none, right? Now, in a democratic or democracy type government power and citizen participation are on the same level because the people make the government. If you got any questions about that, you can definitely come in on the video. Save your questions for the end, and I will post the link so everybody can come in and say their piece, etc., etc. So, what is an autocracy? An autocracy is where one person possesses unlimited power and the citizens have limited power, if any, role in government, as we just saw on the previous graphic there, right? Being autocratic, right, means the power is maintained or kept through inheritance or use of military or police force. So remember, there's autocracy and then there's autocratic. They're two different crazy things. Different forms of autocracies, right? Absolute or totalitarian dictatorship, right? Where a single leader is glorified, like Fidel or Raúl Castro, right? Hitler, Benito Mussolini, Stalin, right? We can name them through history, right? Trotsky, Lenin, right? We can name these types through history, right? Of these type of autocracies, right? Another form of autocratic government is absolute monarchy, like Saudi Arabia, right? Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, countries of that sort that have unitary power are usually autocratic states. An oligarchy. Oligarchy is government by the few. Sometimes a small group exercises control, especially for corrupt and selfish purposes. The citizens has a very limited role. An oligarchy, the group gets its power from military power, social power, wealth, religion, or a combination of all the above. Political opposition is usually suppressed, sometimes violently. Example: Russia, Ukraine, South Africa under apartheid, and Liberia under American Liberians. We've seen, and it was used the most recent example, right, of Ukraine, right, as our fellow American citizens sit here and say, "Oh, we got to save their democracy." Meanwhile, the president of that country has banned 11 opposition political groups, and he literally just outright ousted another one on paper, outright, because they were pro-Russian. I hear crickets from these people, right? We hear crickets from these type of people, right? This is what and we can even debate, right, that the United States is turning into an oligarchy, right? If we sit back and think about this a minute, right? How many elites actually run our country, right? They're all sitting up in the square up there, right? Right? America's turning into it's been an oligarchy. They just guise it, right? They hide behind the Constitution, right? They hide behind local ordinances. They hide behind big government, so they're not shown. But I mean, we can say almost with 90% certainty we've turned into an oligarchy or a very autocratic state. But the people allowed that to happen, right? Because they look to the federal government for everything. But that's not the discussion here. That's not the discussion here. Let's move on. So, an autocracy and oligarchy, right, sometimes claim they rule for the people. Oops, did I say that out? I just said that a second ago, didn't I? That America's turned into an oligarchy or an autocracy, and then I forgot I had this. I made this slide in here. Oh, geez. But it's true, right? I mean, sometimes they claim they rule for the people, right? In reality, the people have very little say in both types of government. Example, may hold elections with one candidate or control the results in various ways. Didn't we just see that? Oh, okay. We'll move on. Another example is even when the governments have a legislature or national assembly, they often only approve decisions made by the leaders. Whoa. Hmm. Something for y'all to think about, right? I'm gonna leave that on the screen while I take another little sippy sip. Another sippy sip here. You know what I mean, another sippy sip. And that isn't is that look, think about it? Isn't that where we are? Isn't that they shove one one candidate in our face from both political parties, and as we have seen that they can and will manipulate, right? Or right, the other part, right? The president sends down an agenda to Congress to complete, and those are the only things that he or she will actually approve. Y'all thinking about this now? This is where it's very important to understand, right? This is why I'm doing this, to get people to understand these things, right? Because it's not all peaches and cream and roses and rainbows and stuff, right? Anyway, let's go on. So, another question for everyone: what is the basic way citizens of a democratic nation can influence the government? A, voting, B, working, C, obeying laws, or D, consuming goods? Okay, I see one voting. I see one voting in said chat. So your answer is voting. Answer is voting. That is correct. Next, moving on. Now we're going to describe the two predominant forms of democratic governments, parliamentary and presidential. There is a stark difference. There is a stark difference. So let's start with what a parliamentary democracy is. It's a system of government in which executive power comes from and is connected to the legislature, which is parliament. It may have a prime minister elected by the legislature. A presidential republic is a system of government in which the president is constitutionally independent of the legislature. The executive branch exists separately from the legislature, to which it is generally not accountable. So, with that being said, here's another good question for the good people that are in the local studio audience. In what system of government does the legislature elect the executive leader of the government? A, democratic; B, communist; C, parliamentary; or C, totalitarian? Again, A, democratic; B, communist; C, parliamentary; or D, totalitarian. Yes, C is correct. Parliamentary. Very good, everybody. Very good. Very good. Okay. So here's a little bit more of a complex question. And we're talking about our previous mother country, England, right? What statement about Great Britain's parliamentary system of government today is true? A, members of both houses of parliament are elected for life. B, the Queen decides which laws parliament will debate. C, members of parliament do not belong to political parties. Or D, the prime minister is not directly chosen by the voters. I think I might need to move that down a little bit, maybe. So it looks like I'm chopped off. I will adjust accordingly so y'all can see my ugly mug. I think that'll be better. Hopefully, y'all can see my ugly mug. Um, so D is correct. The prime minister is not directly chosen by the voters. That is correct. Yes, very good, very good. In most democratic like countries, the government is divided into three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. In Canada, the legislative branch is the A, parliament; B, prime minister; C, Supreme Court; D, governor general. What do we got? 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 Yeah, what do we got? Okay, I'm seeing D in the answer block. Again, let me repeat the question. In most democratic like countries, the government is divided into three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. In Canada, the legislative branch is the A, parliament; B, prime minister; C, Supreme Court; or D, governor general. Everybody that chose number number A is correct. Everyone that chose number A is correct. It is the parliament. Parliament is like our Congress in the United States. So let's start now. Let's get down a little bit deeper now, right? Let's talk about the separation of powers. And I'm kind of leaning now towards the United States because this is where we are. I just wanted to cover the basic forms of government so people understand the types of different governments, et cetera, et cetera. Now I want to start leaning into American politics, American governmental system, American Constitution, things like that, because that's what's really important here, right? So we hear about the separation of powers. We hear it all the time. So the separation of powers is the doctrine of constitutional law under which the three branches of government, executive, legislative, and judicial, are kept separate. This is also known as the system of checks and balances because each branch is given certain powers so as to check and balance the other branches. Here's another thing, another piece of this that the citizens never talk about, because one, they were never taught this for many reasons, right? Obviously, right? Because we see it in our current political landscape, how much the especially these younger folks don't know about government, and it's the division of powers. This is very, very important. If you hold on to anything from this video, you hold on to this right here, because the division of powers is what's going to be your empowerment as a citizen of the 50 states, right? So let's understand what the division of power is, right? The division of powers is the Constitution assigns certain powers to the national government and assigns certain powers to the state government. A lot of you understand this concept, but we'll get to a point where, at what level, right? At what level is that understanding, right? So let's go back. What are the three types of powers of federalism? One is the enumerated powers. Two is the concurrent powers. And four, the implied powers or reserved powers, whichever you want to call it. It's the same thing. Now let's get into that. What are the enumerated powers? The enumerated powers are the powers granted to the federal government and specifically Congress, which are mostly listed in Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. So everyone that's in the live chat area, if you can reach your keyboard or your phone or what have you, right? Um, can you name me at least one enumerated power in the Constitution? Name me at least one enumerated power in the Constitution. As I take another little sippy sip of said sippy sip drink here. Oops, I messed it up. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm seeing bear arms and I'm seeing 13th Amendment. Those are not powers granted to Congress in Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. So you're so let's unpack that real quick, right? Let me see if I could get my can I get it to come up? Okay, so I'm gonna exit out of this if I can, if it lets me. And then let me bring this back up. Okay, what are we doing here? This thing is confusing me. Okay, I'm gonna have to close. Oh, I know why. Crap. Okay. New window. It's not gonna do that for me. Okay, all right. Oh well. I was going to go. I was going to go into it, but I won't. I won't go into the Constitution. But one of the enumerated powers in the Constitution is to coin money. Right. That's an exclusive right of the federal government, is to coin money. Right. Um, Others is like the sole right of impeachment and removal is an enumerated power. Right. The protection of our borders is a strictly an enumerated right in the Constitution. Immigration is an enumerated power of the Constitution, right? So it's the powers that the federal government is only supposed to handle, right? And y'all, let's see, y'all can go back and look at our Article 1, Section 8 now. It says Constitution for basically all of those powers. And some other powers in there are implied enumerated, right? Because it's attached to one branch, but the other one executes it. But that's a whole nother discussion I don't want to get outside of that realm and start confusing you guys on this, right? So we'll continue forward. What are the concurrent powers? Okay, your concurrent powers are powers referring to the powers which are shared by both the federal government and the state government, right? Now, this is where it gets muddy and murky, right? Because people seem to confuse the concurrent powers with enumerated powers, and concurrent powers with reserved powers or implied powers, right? So I want everyone to throw on their thinking caps a second, right? And there are no wrong answers, technically speaking. There are no wrong answers. I want you to really think about this question a second, right? Name one power that's a concurrent power, a power that is shared by the federal government and the state government. Now, keep in mind, most concurrent powers, right, has the caveat that the state holds most of that concurrent power, but the federal government also shares in that power also. Can you name one? Name one. I'm thirsty, y'all. I'm thirsty. What makes you thirsty today? I got some waters. Mm, yes. Welcome to everybody that's stepped in and listening. I see you. I appreciate y'all. We're just having a little civics. Little civics get up here, courtesy of the Conscious Conservative Media Network. So concurrent powers. Well, laws are close, Miss Christie. Laws are close. That's close, but you want to get down a little deeper than laws. And voting, voting is actually a reserved power. Voting is a reserved power, right? Because the United States Constitution, right, says that the only thing the federal government can do is what the only thing the federal government can do is the time, manner, and places, right? But the states control the elections and how they ran. So that's not a concurrent power. That technically would be an implied power. Mm-hmm. So one of the concurrent powers, okay, would be law enforcement. Law enforcement is a concurrent power that is shared between the states and the federal government. Public health is also one that is shared between the federal government and the and your states. That's an example of, you know what I mean. If you've seen situations where the federal government has come into somewhere, right, and have done something, they had the jurisdiction to do as such because they shared that particular power with with that agency in the state, et cetera, et cetera. But that gets convoluted too. So I don't want to get deep into that either, but I just want to give a base overview of what concurrent powers are. What are the reserved powers or the implied powers? These are referring to powers that are not delegated to the federal government. Sounds familiar, y'all? Sounds familiar? Ninth and 10th Amendment. Ninth and 10th Amendment defines Ninth and 10th Amendment defines the reserved powers. Because remember, everything enumerated, right? Article 1, Section 8, United States Constitution, everything enumerated, right, is what they can do. Everything else, right, falls to the states and the people. And we can name all these reserved powers all day long, right? Again, law enforcement, right? Public health is another reserved power. I mean, there's multitudes of others. I mean, you can really just come up with it in your head, and more than likely, the best way I explain this to people is: does it say it in the Constitution? Does it say it? No. Okay, we're done. That's my right, not theirs, right? And that goes to the one of the. Let me back up. One of the reasons I'm doing this is because one of the abortion debate, right? The people want the federal government so bad to tell them what to do with their with their bodies, an unelected body to tell them what to do with their bodies, right? Congress did not codify Roe because they know they can't. They can't, right? But people are so scared to exercise their civic duty as a citizen because you are the state government. You elected the officials that pass the laws that directly govern you. This is why I'm doing this, to get people to understand. This is not written in the Constitution. So again, it goes 10th, 9th, and 10th Amendment. Hands washed. We're done. That's y'all's problem down there. We ain't got to deal with this. That's y'all's problem. Y'all fix it. If you're too lazy to not want to fix it, don't throw a fit later. I can't curse because it's YouTube. But it's as simple. This is simple. It is simple. So just think about everything that's not written in the Constitution is a reserved or implied power. That is the end of said presentation. I thank y'all. I thank y'all for coming. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to in the said chat, I am going to put in the link. Hopefully y'all can see it. If y'all can see it, let me know. But y'all can hit that link that I just placed in there. I'm going to start. Can I pin it? No. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up the floor for questions for people to come in with their questions, et cetera, and let's have a conversation on this. So you can click the link, you can jump in. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Got any questions? Again, come through. I can answer some of the questions in the chat also. I can try to real quick. So one question from Miss Cheryl: if shared, can one override the other? No. Well, let me take it back. Yes, the state, if it's a concurrent power, the state can override, right? Because remember, a shared or concurrent power, right, is still reserved to the state. They just mutually handshake on this. Now, it depends on the jurisdiction of the issue, right? For example, immigration, right? Immigration is one of those things, like if they're chasing someone into a state because they've jumped the border or what have you, right? The state doesn't take jurisdiction in that case, right? The federal government takes jurisdiction, right, in that situation. So it all depends, right? It all depends on what the situation is, where the power shifted. But for the most part, to be on the safe side, the state, right? The state would take control of the concurrent power situation because they own most of that power, right? Because it's within their jurisdiction. So good question. Good question. Good question. Okay, there's a question from Ashley. Would military also fall under that? The military is, yes, the military is an enumerated power. That is correct. The National Guard is actually a reserved set. It's reserved because that's the militia part, right? That's the militia part of the Constitution, right? So with that being said, military obviously, right, it's separate, right? Because you have your state militia, which is the National Guard, then you have the United States military, right? But that's a whole nother civics lesson too. That's a whole nother one. They explain that in the Posse Comitatus and all that good stuff. So yes, great question. Great question. Again, the in the chat, if you can see it in the chat, there is a link in the chat. Y'all can come through and let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Got your questions? Let's talk about it. Pop on in. Here's another good comment too from Ms. Cheryl. Constitutions that seem to be matching our government type list. Yes, that is. It's not. It is not matching it at all, because unfortunately for us Americans, a lot of us, our parents, right? Our parents fell asleep at the wheel, right? While they were being, I was gonna say fell asleep at the wheel, they were being distracted by the fodder in the background, right? As they were being distracted, they was doing all these underhanded things to take more power from the citizens, right? So now this is what we're dealing with, and we have to fight like hell to get it all back. Okay. Yeah. So again, I don't know if y'all can see the link, but the link is in there um for the to jump in. Now, marijuana is a good one, right? Because even though on the federal level, right? Marijuana is a controlled substance, right? It is illegal, but this is what's interesting, right? There's this doctrine called nullification, right? And basically, the states can nullify state law if they think it's unconstitutional, right? It's not a widely practiced doctrine because people in their mind, right, don't want to cede any of that power or keep any of that power. They want to give it to the federal government. They look to the federal government for everything, right? Nullification should be a thing. It should be a mainstream thing. If a state thinks this law is unconstitutional, they should not have to abide by that law, period. Even though the supremacy clause says that, any laws made therein, right, is the supreme law of the land. But if it is unconstitutional, if it contradicts the Constitution, the states should not have to follow that. But unfortunately, they are forced into unconstitutional situations because of the separation of the federal government from the people, meaning the 17th Amendment, right? When the Senate became a constituency of the people, right? The Senate became the representative of the people also, right? That's a problem. That's a huge problem because now the states don't have a say in anything. That's another discussion for another day. So, question is, so is nullification is when the states override the Fed. That is correct, Miss Tina. That is what nullification is. That is exactly what nullification does. That is exactly. I wonder if I could get. Okay, here we go. Okay, let me see. I can pull that up real quick. Uh, I can definitely pull that up real quick for you. Let me. Okay, let me see if I can share this real quick with you guys. Um, Here we go. Share screen. Let's pop that in. Booyah. Let's make that bigger. Okay, here we go. Okay, as you can see up here, I don't know how well you guys can see that, right? I'm sure you can see that pretty good. But nullification is the constitutional theory that individual states can invalidate federal laws or judicial decisions they deem unconstitutional. And it has been controversial since the inception of early American history, right? So so that's basically what nullification is, right? Because again, right, if we are to be if we are to be 50 individual states, right? 50 individual states that create the federal government, then why should we allow that federal government that we created to override us in our individual states? Because we're 50 individual nation states, right? To put it in that context, right? Because everybody's laws differ from each other, right? Everybody's style of governing, etc., is the same. We're not a confederation, as y'all seen in the earlier slide, right? We're not a confederation. We are a federation, right? Where you have the separation of powers, the division of powers, and individual regional authorities, right, which are your states, which breaks down into counties, which breaks down into municipalities, and in some states, communities, right? Um, but nullification, yes, nullification should definitely be a thing that's practiced, but practice sparingly, right? Practice sparingly, like with gun laws, right? Gun laws, if it impedes on the state constitution, they should nullify it. Period. Period. Game over, right? Look at what they did with marijuana, right? States like Colorado that have marijuana dispensaries, right? All that good stuff, right? They've basically nullified state law. They nullified federal law, right? They said it's illegal. States like whatever, and they're doing what they do in the federal government. See, this is why, again, it's very important to watch the maneuvering, right, of the federal government and the maneuvering of states, because if a conglomerate of states come together and said, no, this ain't working for us, guess what? The federal government cannot do anything. Why are we not doing the same thing when it comes to firearms? Why? Why didn't we nullify Obamacare? Right? Why didn't we? Because nowhere in the Constitution says that the federal government has to institute some sort of health care upon the body. It's not an enumerated power. They try to use the general welfare clause for that, but that's not what the general welfare clause means. But so many people are so uninformed. Oh yeah, general welfare of the people. No, that's not what it means. It's not what it means. Right? Obamacare should have been nullified from the start, if not allowed to pass. That's why it got shot down in court. Right? The latest one being the Texas case, Texas versus California, that shot down the rest of Obamacare. Right? So good question, Miss Tina. Good question, Miss Tina. Again, the link in the chat. Come on up in her. Come on up in here and ask your question. So with monetary links from federal to states, do states have power over the federal government? I don't understand that question, Miss Ashley. So you might have to reword that. Might have to reword that. So, and let me know what you mean by that. Let's see what we got here. What other question? Okay, so question from Miss Christie. So does that mean whatever law the president tries to pass regarding gun control, the state has the final say for their state? Now, let's try not to confuse executive orders with law, right? Because remember, executive orders are not law, right? And basically, any law that Congress passes, right? Let's put this into the forefront. Any law that passes both chambers of Congress doesn't necessarily need the president's signature, right? If it gets to his desk and he doesn't sign it in 7 days, it automatically becomes law anyway, right? The president's signature, right, is literally a formality at that point, right? It's just a formality, right? So with that being said, an executive order has the power of law on the federal level. The states can be like, no, not working out for me, and completely ignore it, right? Completely ignore it. That's why if you go back and you look at the OSHA executive order, how that got shot down so quick, because the fact that it stepped on state authority, just based on that alone, it's stepping on state authority in that matter, because remember the concurrent powers, right? And reserve powers, healthcare, right? And the primary health of the citizenry is up to the states. That's one of the reasons why the OSHA mandate got shot down, just in simple terms, without talking about all the doctrines that fell into it. In layman's terms, that's why the OSHA mandate got shot down. Right? So with that, again, right, anything that the president would sign as an executive order when it comes to gun control, et cetera, They can just flat out say, no, we ain't doing this, bro. We ain't doing this. We good. We ain't doing this. We ain't doing this at all. And just be like, whatever. Because it's not law, right? It's not law. It's not attached to the Constitution to become the supreme law of the land, right? So good question though, Miss Christie. Good question, Miss Christie. Thank you. I appreciate it. Let's see what we got. Okay, Miss Ashley, you're back. When states get money from the federal government, who gets to hold the power over the money? For example, Fed gives state money for schools. Fed says do A or I will take away funding. Yes, yes, and that's the exact situation I was talking about, Miss Ashley. We was talking about how the 17th Amendment, right, took away the power, right, from the states and gave it to the people, right? So the states are stuck in a quid pro quo, right? Another good example of what you're talking about, Miss Ashley, is Medicaid expansion, right? Medicaid expansion. Remember when they expanded Medicaid like 5 years ago and the federal government couldn't handle it, so they sent it down to the states, right? It shouldn't have never worked like that in the first place, right? It shouldn't have never worked like that, right? And they were like, okay, here you go. If you expand Medicaid, we will give you X amount of dollars. If you don't, you don't get no funding, and we could potentially take away other funding, other existing funding, right? Quid pro quo, right? The states are stuck in a quid pro quo because the states are not properly represented in the federal legislature. So I guarantee you, if the states were represented in the federal legislature as they're supposed to be by the state legislatures, none of that would have went down. And a lot of this stuff we're looking at would have never went down. Right. So I say thank God for the filibuster, even though I hate the concept of the filibuster, but that's the only thing that is saving the Senate. That is the only thing that's saving the Senate from allowing the federal government to become tyrannical on its face. Good question, though, Miss Ashley. Good question. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for working my brain. All right. Do they have actual power even though the money comes from taxes? Um okay, so that was an addendum. That's the rest of your question. Okay. Yeah, they actually have the power when it comes to monetary funding, right? You hear the argument from these people that are like, "Oh, well, blue states fund red states and this, that, and the third." That's coming from a mind of a power trip, right? That's a power trip thing, right? Power trip. These people, it's a power trip. That's all it is. It's a power trip to these people. That's all it is. It's a power trip for these people, right? Um. So, see, is there any more questions in the chat? Okay, no other questions in the chat. So again, right? I'll post a link up here for one more time. I'll probably stay on for another, I don't know, a couple minutes or so since we went over that basic stuff. I gotta next week we'll get into more advanced civics, and I mean more down on the local level because that's where we need to kind of activate. Right, I got 6 minutes stuff. I got an hour, so we need to activate on our local levels. Forget the federal government, forget the president, the vice president, your federal legislature. We need to concentrate on our state legislatures, right? Because here's the thing: I don't care if you're pro-life, if you're pro-choice, etc., right? You need your state legislatures on board, right? I mean, even the red states, right? Even the red states that had trigger laws, right? They've held back so they can add in a provision for medical necessity for abortions. They've held back. They didn't drop it in right away. They held back, right? So, the failure to, I think the failure to people to see the compassion because of red and blue is delusional for me, right? The second thing is, here, you know what? I'm gonna go here a minute. here's my call to action for everybody, right? And what I'm going to do, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to, let's do this. I'm going to, down at the bottom, in the scrolling marquee at the bottom, I should have this up at all times, but here we go. Save. Okay, so at the bottom, in the scrolling marquee at the bottom, right, there's my email address, info@bpmg.us. That's my thing. That's my thing, right? That's my email, right? What I want y'all to do, this is what I want everybody to do. Find out. I want to know who your your local council member is in your district. If you have a county commission, I want to know who that person is. I want to know who your mayor is. I want to know who your state house rep is, right? I want to know who your state senator is, right? I also want to know in your state in your state legislature, I want to know who your president of the Senate is, and I want to know who your speaker of the House is, and ultimately I want you to know your governor. And I'm asking that for a reason, right? Because we need to change the focus, right? We need to change the focus from Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, Mitch McConnell, and shift it to what matters, right? This is what matters. This is exactly what matters. Those people I just mentioned, right? This is important, right? Because if you don't know who those people are, you're not going to solve any problems. You're going to exacerbate problems, right? So we need. So this is a favor I want from you guys. Seriously, email me info@bpmg.us. Everybody from your local city council person, your local county commissioner, if you have one, your state house rep, your state senator, your speaker of the house, your president of the Senate, and your governor. Let me know who they are. Okay, Miss Ashley, I see your question before we roll out. Got a minute. So this is how the federal government has the school systems by the balls. Yes, that is exactly correct, Miss Ashley. And that goes into talking about Title I funding and Title IX funding for schools, right? That's a whole nother beast. We can talk about that, a different time for sure, because that gets very interesting when we're talking about Title I and Title IX funding when it comes to education. So and yes, Miss Marlene, yes, I could. I can name all of them off the top of my head. I even have their phone numbers. You know what I mean? That's where I'm at with it, right? I have their phone numbers. I can just go click, 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 call them up, right? So that's how that goes down. But anyway, there's no further questions. Hey, I want to thank y'all for coming through as always. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all taking your time out of your day. We'll be doing this again next weekend. Same bat time, same bat channel. We're going to get into more advanced civics, and I think I'll be talking about the difference between Dillon's rule and home rule and general law cities and charter cities. So you get an understanding of that also, right? Because it's important. This civics thing, right, is a lot deeper than voting. Some people think their civic duty is only to vote, right? When it's more than that, right? It's getting involved in your community, making a change you want to see in your community. Because remember, most laws that become federal law start in your backyard. They start in your backyard and make their way up to the state level, and then your federal representatives in your state take it to the federal level. This is what you got to understand. So the change you want to see in the federal government needs to start in your backyard with your city councils, with your mayors, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, thank y'all. Appreciate y'all. And all that good stuff. And y'all, you guys have a great weekend. Don't do nothing I wouldn't do. You know, just do the thing. Until next time, y'all, be easy.